Do you pronounce your name as Peter?
Yeah, it's as if there's no I in it. Just yeah,
Okay, because it's like there's an I and it's like, is it
yeah. It's a gut
Peter?
spelling. Yeah.
Okay. So, welcome to Men's Couch, Peter. I'm excited to talk about sexuality and masculinity and friendship and just how those things intertwine. I've been doing more episodes in regard to that for season 6. I kind of starting out, of course, when you're starting out with a podcast, you kind of like you're doing topics that kind of mostly like really impact you. So now I want to like kind of branch out and just do topics that like I feel like people don't usually talk about and things that the church or just people in general are hesitant to really discuss openly. But yeah, so why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners?
Yeah, glad to be here. Yeah, my name is Peter Volk, and I do a couple different things. I get to kind of write and speak about vocational singleness and discern between Christian marriage and singleness and kind of LGBT plus topics according to a historic Christian sexual ethic, and have been published in a variety of places. And I also am the executive director of Equip, which is a ministry that has trained over 40,000 Christian leaders over the last 12 years to become places where LGBT plus Christians can belong and thrive according to a historic Christian sexual ethic. And then I'm also a licensed professional counselor and meet kind of an individual counseling with people who are often navigating questions of faith and sexuality. My I guess I'll say my denominational background is that I'm an Anglican. I go to an ACNA church and have been Anglican for most of my life. And yeah, all this work matters to me, and a lot of this has to do with kind of finding belonging in the body of Christ because I'm a Christian, because I'm gay, and because I'm convinced of that historic sexual ethic for myself. So
Yeah.
at least when I use that phrase, historic Christian sexual ethic, I mean a belief that God's best for every Christian is either vocational singleness or Christian marriage, and those defined in a particular way. So, vocational singleness defined as a calling to lifetime singleness for the sake of kingdom work with undivided attention, and Christian marriage defined as a calling to lifetime marriage between one Christian woman and one Christian man for many purposes, but one of those being an openness to raising children for the sake of the kingdom. So, yeah, I'm convinced that that's God's best for every Christian, including me, even though I experience endearing same sex attraction. And so a lot of my work involves talking about those things, also talking about kind of how I'm walking out vocational singleness in the context of community, and have lived in an intentional Christian community for the past 7 years. And I'm really grateful for the dudes that I get to call my people, and believe a lot in our churches needing to do a better job with providing
Yeah.
community for people who are in long-term singleness. So
Yeah,
yeah, glad.
you have really good content. Like I'm always like looking forward to like the next post. It's like, okay, what is he gonna post like today? You know, because I feel like your content really uh, allows people to question their own like deeply held beliefs or assumptions they had about just life
Sure.
and that,
Hmm.
like how to show up in the world. So I think that kind of it helps people to open their mind to things. You mentioned that you are a therapist as well, because I also like I'm going to school to be a therapist,
Very cool.
so I'm excited for that.
Yeah.
And just like I'm also one of the things I really want to do as a therapist is work with clients that are or just believers that are wrestling with sexuality, because I think a lot of people are, from what and like at least in my experience, from what I've witnessed with my friends in my community. But they kind of just it's like a hidden thing that they don't really talk about as openly as other battles.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm like passionate about that. And for me, it's for me, I don't know, cuz like I don't I feel not weird, but cuz like I'm straight, but I'm also like very interested in helping believers that do wrestle with same-sex attraction or identify as gay, because I noticed the mental health effects of just being in the closet or not having a safe space to even discuss anything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, glad to know that some of that stuff's been helpful, some of that content you've
Yeah.
seen. And yeah, I enjoy being a therapist. Like many people who are therapists, I became a therapist because I benefited from therapy, and had some good therapists through my story. So yeah.
Yeah. So I had a question and then it left. So I guess I'll okay. So one of the questions that I wanted to ask is what have you witnessed as a therapist being on the other side and helping clients kind of navigate sexuality, whether they're like I guess young adults or believers that have been believers for years and they come to terms with their sexuality.
Yeah, so I say an interesting kind of phenomena that's pretty common among clients that reach out to me is that they're reaching out to me because there's two other versions of therapy that they definitely want to avoid.
Mhm.
They don't believe that kind of pray the gay away is the solution. And so they want to avoid kind of any quasi therapists or pastors who, if they met with them, their solution to it would be, well, you just pray hard enough and God will completely
Not pray
eliminate
the
your
gay.
yeah, pray the gay away.
Okay.
So they don't want a therapist that is going to offer that as the solution. But also, many of my clients have gone to kind of standard, licensed professional counselors who were either not believers or even believers, and they feel like those therapists push them toward abandoning a historic Christian sexuality. Puts a hand on the
See.
scale in a way that therapists, licensed professional counselors, actually are not supposed to.
Yeah,
It
they're
is
not supposed
unethical.
to do that.
We are not supposed
Yeah.
to impose our beliefs on our clients, and yet that's what often my clients tell me is that their previous therapist is not a believer. Claims to be very kind of welcoming and respecting kind of clients and their values, and yet was constantly pushing the client towards
Yeah.
the
I
therapist's values on LGBT plus
yeah.
topics.
I think the issue with that is like therapists, of course, they want to be welcoming and open to clients, but I think they overstep boundaries whenever they take the idea, okay, I'm just going to be welcoming and support my client, but also they have like their own idea of what supporting their client is, and then that
Mhm.
kind of like pushes them, and then it kind of like pushes their clients away, and it makes their client kind of feel like cornered to
Right.
make a
Yeah.
decision.
I mean, ultimately psychologically unsafe, and they don't create a
Yeah.
space where the client can actually discover what they believe and how they want to pursue that. Instead, they just do the same thing that the pray the gay away therapists are doing, just in a different direction, equally destructive. So instead, when most of my clients kind of connect with me, I'm very clear with them that, I'm pretty transparent online about my opinions on things. But when I'm, wearing my licensed professional counselor hat, I don't those beliefs don't come in the room with me. My values
Mhm.
are irrelevant in either direction. And my goal is to help my clients achieve their goals according to their values, whatever those are. And if they ever feel like my stuff's coming in the room and pushing them in one direction or another, call me out. I'll kick that stuff back out outside the room. But what that means is that I have clients often who start meeting with me while they hold a historic Christian sexual ethic. And then sometimes
Mhm.
over the course of meeting with me, their theology changes. And I'm very clear with them in the beginning of the process of counseling and then in the midst of it that like I want to continue to be your therapist, regardless of what your beliefs are, and help you pursue your goals in the healthiest ways. And so I have clients that later in meeting with them in therapy, they're getting into dating people of the same sex, and they're getting into kind of disclosing with people in their life that their theological convictions have changed and dealing with the aftermath of that. And I continue meeting with those clients, right? So I'm not pushing them in either direction. I'm not refusing to support them in either direction. I'm not canceling them for either decisions. So I think it's just really important that there are actually few therapists out there who have the expertise
Yeah.
to meet with LGBT plus clients and are actually neutral and
Yeah. I
actually
feel like
in the ways that they hold their values.
yeah, I feel like especially in the church, we kind of
So and I would say particularly outside the church.
yeah.
I'm saying there's few non-Christian therapists who are ethical around that.
Okay, not like pushing people to make a decision or push them into like camps that they're not comfortable with.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just
Yeah.
assume that there's no way to hold a historic Christian sexual ethic that is anything but self-hating.
Mhm.
And so they impose that value on the client.
Mm. Yeah, that's kind of yeah. As I feel like I feel like if people feel forced to like I guess adopt beliefs that aren't really true to themselves, then they're definitely like it's kind of gonna hinder the process of healing when it comes to
Well,
therapy. So
for sure.
yeah. So But yeah, your content is amazing. I think there's a few things that I like about your content. It navigates questions about what it means to be single, because it's something like that I've been thinking about too. Like as a young adult, it's like I know like some people are like, oh my gosh, like I need to get married, like I have to get married. But like then there's me. It's like I love being single, and I like just my community that I've made. Is very fulfilling for me, and I feel like I don't need marriage to just be happy. And I feel like I don't know if this is still like a thing, but I think for the longest time, marriage was seen as just the number one relationship that everyone is should have when they're to be an adult, and I don't think that's true.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, and at least if we're like looking to the scriptures to tell us what we're made for and what's good, for us, what we need, Jesus is pretty clear that Christian marriage is a good option, and singleness for the sake of the kingdom is a good option, and he recognizes that some are called to one, some are able to kind of receive the gift of one, and some are able to receive the gift of another. And then Paul reiterates the same thing in 1 Corinthians 7, that like not everyone is offered, people are only offered one gift, and God knows which gift would be best for us. And some are called to one, some are called to another. And yeah, in the beginning in creation, Adam and Eve, in addition to being friends and co-workers and co-rulers, they were also spouses. But we know that Jesus teaches that in the new heavens and new earth, in the kind of physical New Jerusalem where we'll all be, there will be no marriage or sex or romance or procreation anymore. We'll all be celibate. And so it's meaningful if kind of all of our destiny is eventually kind of a celibate life. That's one of the purposes of kind of people in the church called to celibacy today, is to preview that.
Yeah.
Hopefully preview that in a way that gives us hope. But unfortunately, because the churches have done such a poor job of supporting singleness, sometimes, it might be kind of a depressing preview, right? It might make us worried.
Yeah. It's not
The
supposed to be.
disappointing. So
It's not supposed to be depressing. It feels like that there's little options for fulfilling relationships and community. But I don't know. I don't know. Like for me, so personally, my friends are very like important to me. They're kind of like family a little bit. Family too is important, but my friends specifically are like I value friendship. I've like if you notice, if you go through like my content and podcasts, like I talk a lot about friendship, and I've had like friendship like experts and psychologists, which is pretty cool and interesting. Talk about it because I think hopefully what I'm noticing is like post COVID society and just in general is starting to hopefully revalue friendship and not like to see the what friendship like the true essence and value of it. Because I think people, especially like after COVID, they realize that well, like okay, I actually like miss my friends. I actually need people. And that kind of the lack of seeing each other and the lack kind of created this awareness and desire to have people around. So I'm hoping that like in the near future and with this podcast and like other things that I've been seeing online that friendship is valued and also not saying that like okay friendship is above marriage or marriage is above friendship, but that this is also a fulfilling relationship. And especially for men, I've noticed too, at least like in my community, I've noticed that okay, we value each other a lot, and there's no, it isn't, we don't need to have these barriers of how we need to suppress our desire for fulfilling relationships. Our friendships can go depth to them, and we don't need to like see it as okay. I'm very close with my friends. Is this weird? Like, so I think some people are still stuck in that mindset. It's like, okay, is this weird? Where this is going, whether you're gay or not. I think a lot of men struggle with that.
right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, and I feel like a lot of the research shows that up until kind of a certain age in like later elementary school, the levels of kind of loneliness for girls versus boys is pretty similar. And then when there starts to be a lot more gender differentiation and a lot more gatekeeping around what it means to be a boy or be a girl within girl and boy spaces, loneliness starts to increase among boys, particularly compared to girls, and then particularly as puberty hits. And there's lots of kind of theories for why that is. But yeah, there's ways in which men are more lonely or more afraid to lean into friendship. There's ways that women can be more emotionally and physically affectionate with their friends, and it doesn't lead them to question anything about their sexuality. But yet, when men are, other people question their sexuality. So there's some interesting dynamics there for sure.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
And then that fear of one's sexuality being questioned keeps people from being close, even
Yeah,
if they
if
aren't gay.
it's yeah, it's kind of it is like a shame when you think about it because people don't know like how fulfilling those type of relationships can be, those type of friendships can be because I think everybody has it. They're just like very afraid to go deeper with their friends. And what I've experienced, especially recently, is just me and my friends getting together pretty regularly and just talking about life and just being present. And I think that's kind of also what like why I started the podcast too, like a while back. And it's kind of funny when I listen to like old episodes, it's like okay. But now that like I've gotten so close to the people in my community, we recognize more like the need for it. So I think it's honestly like a blessing because I never thought that I would experience that, even though like I desire that so much. I was like to see it like come to fruition. It's like it's amazing. But yeah, and it's also like surprising too because you see guys like really like invest in each other and you're like I never imagined that like being, but it's awesome to see because for so long like we've had that internal hunger for closeness with each other, but we just feel hesitant to express that. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of been a little bit of my journey. I did want to ask, so whenever I guess not to make you feel old, but so when did you kind of notice, okay, my sexuality is not like everybody else. You know, I am attracted to the same sex.
Yeah, for me, it was probably sixth grade.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Is that kind of is that pretty normal for people, or is it just
Yeah.
like
I mean, I think
arranged?
in puberty, late
Yeah, because
elementary
it's like
school,
right.
early middle school tends to be when people start to recognize that people are attractive and then tend to realize, oh, I'm not attracted to the people that my friends are attracted to. So for some people, it's a little bit more delayed. I mean, female sexuality works differently than male sexuality. Male sexuality is more primarily driven by the physical and visual, whereas female sexuality is more of a mix between that and the kind of emotional and relational. And so there's ways in which women who experience same-sex attraction, it can be less clear to them until later because like the physical visual cues are less obvious or prominent. But yeah, generally for guys, it becomes pretty obvious in middle school.
So another thing you talked about in on your content is like closet trauma,
Hmm.
or like being in the closet. So did you experience that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, the only things I heard, all the things that I heard before realizing that I was gay, all the things that I heard from, people around me, adults around me, church spaces, Christian spaces, was pretty kind of scary and discouraging. And so I definitely did not share that I was gay when I realized that I was gay, and
Yeah.
I kept that to myself for about 5 years, which is kind of the average. And that was the average, back when I was growing up in the early 2000s. But even recent research showed that, teens are still waiting an average of 5 years to tell a parent or pastor that they are the queer in some way, that they're LGBT plus in some way. And so that statistic is kind of holding. And, I think we can guess like why people hesitate to share.
Yeah.
But there's a real cost to hesitating to share because it leads to a sense of loneliness and disconnection from your friends because they don't really know the full you, and so you don't feel connected to them as deeply, and you're afraid that if they knew the full you, they would reject you. It often leads to a lot of shame. People who hesitate, particularly if they come from a religious background, and if they think that not only is there maybe something a little bit off about the fact that I experience same-sex attraction, but actually it's my fault that I
Yeah.
am forsaken and unredeemable because this is part of my story. That can lead to a lot of shame. It can lead to a lot of kind of wanting to hide from God. It can lead a lot to sadness that, gosh, maybe I'll be alone for the rest of my life. And for that sadness just to turn into depression. And also can lead to a lot of kind of adopting unhealthy coping mechanisms to try to medicate those painful feelings that we're having. I don't want to feel that loneliness. I don't want to feel that fear of people finding out and treating me differently. I don't want to feel that sadness that I may be alone for the rest of my life. I don't want to feel that depression. And so I go to food or alcohol or porn or video games to numb those feelings. So, if anyone spends 5 years doing that,
Yeah, because you're like hiding like a huge huge chunk of yourself.
yeah, it adds up, And
Yeah.
so just if when someone comes out 5 years later, it does not make those 5 years of essentially trauma
That
in some
is
ways
I see
self-inflicted
how that
trauma,
is traumatic.
but ultimately, it's because of one's environment. That 5
Yeah.
years of trauma doesn't just magically go away.
Yeah.
It's still with us. It's still in our bodies, and it will linger. Even with kind of consistent and kind of focus work in therapy, it takes multiple years to undo those wounds of the closet. And for most, it lingers for the rest of our life. And so it's a real cost, a real burden that queer people are carrying. And still today, you'd think that, oh, well, it's 2026. Teens don't hesitate to come out. They still do.
Yeah,
At
because
least
it's just
statistically.
I think people think that we might assume, especially like straight men, we might like assume that okay, like it's just easy. Why aren't you? Because I've had this like idea in my head of like, well, why didn't you, tell me? Why weren't you vulnerable enough to tell me? But that like in what you've mentioned with like closet trauma, it's real, and that you can't like for me. I needed to stop personalizing someone's hesitancy to be like honest and open with me because that is something that they're wrestling with and they have agency to disclose. Even though like, I can have good intentions and say like, well, I value vulnerability, I value like, people opening up, but it has to be on their comfort level and based on how they feel ready to disclose.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's generational trends related to that as well, right? I mean, older Gen Alpha and younger Gen Z, particularly among males, is more conservative culturally than older Gen Z and younger millennials. And so there's a
I
sense of
noticed
like,
that. I'm like surprised, but I noticed that.
yeah. And so in some ways, like, particularly among guys who are queer in some way, you have more peers who may treat you poorly once you come out than was the case 10 years ago.
Yeah, yeah, I noticed that.
It's not getting
Um,
easier. It's getting
yeah,
harder.
it's not it's not easier. That's what like I don't know. That's what I've been like hearing about certain things, but that's a podcast for a different day.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, so you're going through. So you said you didn't come out till you were like in high school or
Correct. Yeah, yeah. And even then, it was like the first time I told my parents was in high school. The first time I came out broadly to friends was in college, and then like came out on the internet a couple years after college. But yeah.
okay. So it was like developmentally. When did you say? So you said you were like you were more like ready to come out in high school, and it just kind of like gradual over time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what
I
did
didn't really tell a large number of people until college.
so what did like coming out mean to you specifically? Because I know like it's different for like everyone.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the biggest reason it was twofold. One, I had for the first I did not have close guy friends in middle school or high school, which is typical of a lot of dudes who are gay, experience same-sex attraction, particularly if we're in the closet. We are afraid of being friends with other guys because we're afraid of getting too close to them, catching feelings, being obvious and outing ourselves accidentally. It was just so much easier, it's so much less complicated to be friends with girls.
Actually, I no okay. I want to put a pin on that because I do want to talk about something that is related to that in the episode. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
go ahead.
No, it is an interesting phenomena. So,
Yeah.
but college was the first time that I actually had close Christian guy friends.
Mhm.
And so I wanted to tell them about my sexuality because I wanted to know, the whole fully known and fully loved thing. Ultimately, no matter how good of friends they were to me, I knew there was a part of my story they didn't know. And I knew that until I told them, I could always doubt, well, they may not really be my friends if they knew everything about me.
Yeah.
So I can't really fully let this love in until I know it's safe, until I know that they know everything and they still love me. So that was the reason for coming out. I think another big reason was just I was tired of my secret having this power that other people could use to hurt,
Yeah.
that other people could out me, and that had power over me. And so in some ways it was like, I want to come out so that that secret has no power anymore. I just want to throw it out in the middle of the room. I want everybody to know so that no one can ever kind of use my secret against me, or I can never be hurt by someone else disclosing before I do, or in a way different than I would. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, because it's for me as like I'm a very like highly empathic, like highly intuitive person. So I have a lot of friends that like they didn't like come out, or it was like they kind of hinted at that, but they also like, I guess because they're not like mature, they would like kind of like withdraw and like distance when we would become more close. And then part of me knew that they were hiding something. And for me it was difficult because I wanted more like intimacy and just more closeness, and they like were kind of pulling away. And I was like, well, why are you pulling away? What did I do? It's not nothing that like I did. It's like what you mentioned, them being like afraid of kind of being found out, and that sort of, it's, I think. And also you're in college, like currently I'm in college, and also like you're in college or high school or being a young adult, and like you're, coming to terms with your how you identify. So there's like that pressure. And then even if someone is this like, I hopefully I see myself as like a safe person, but they still like, even if you're a safe person, they still feel like, okay, I'm not ready for that. I'm not ready to open myself up. So it's, for me it like helps to see that even though you are presenting, okay, I value vulnerability and I value just like, I'm gonna love you no matter what. I guess like to some people that might be a little bit scary, and a little bit something that it kind of goes against our identity, like of having shame. Because if you have like a shame-based identity, like for so long, or like have closet trauma, then it just kind of like goes against that and how you feel about yourself. And then you feel like, well, I like this, how you're loving me doesn't align with how I feel. So, and what I've experienced is a lot of people like just going like the other direction and withdrawing. And it makes sense. It makes more sense now that I understand it more, and it helps me to have like compassion for myself and like other people.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And so would it your desire to kind of, I guess, be an expert at this like in therapy, or just be a therapist for clients that are dealing with this? Where does your desire come from? Or is it just like your own struggle?
Yeah. I mean, a big part of my story was coming out in college, and particularly like sharing my story, my testimony in a Christian fraternity that I was a part of. And one, a lot of the straight guys in that fraternity responded really well, loved me well, got coffee with me in the kind of weeks and months after I shared my story, and was really cared for well by them. But then over those months, also slowly, there was a good chunk of guys, out of a fraternity of 100 guys, about 15 guys in our fraternity, who shared with me that they had the same story and convictions that I did. The same, they were gay, and they are also trying to walk out celibacy. And so it was a group of us kind of that started doing life together in college. And one thing I realized was that all of us, well, two things I realized actually. One was that all of us were afraid that if we followed Jesus's wisdom, we would be alone for the rest of our life. And then the second is that none of us had parents or pastors who knew what to do with us.
Yeah.
And so I was, my plan was to go to medical school. I had taken the MCAT, applied to medical school, gotten in. But it just became really obvious by the end of my senior year that like what God wanted me to do was to be a part of some kind of ministry work, equipping parents and pastors to walk alongside people like me. And people like my friends that I loved in my Christian fraternity, because I'd seen some of them because of the lack of support they had, kind of fall away from the faith. And I didn't want that for me, and I didn't
Yeah.
want that for them, and I wanted the church to do better. And so I believed that I needed some kind of professional training to kind of do that ministry work well. And so I sought out kind of getting a master's in clinical mental health counseling. Again, not because I believe Pray the Gay Away is in any way the solution, but because I felt like the way therapists approach anyone is, how are you hurting, and what do you really need, and how can we help you
Yeah.
get?
Like
And so
safety.
that's the posture I wanted to bring into full-time ministry. But yeah, I felt called to be a part of some kind of ministry that was equipping parents and pastors to better minister to queer people according to a biblical sexual ethic. And then, I mean, this was back in 2014. There was only one organization that existed, and it was a regional organization based out of Boston. I was in Nashville, so I
Yeah,
was like, well,
yeah,
I guess I need to start something. And so I started Equip
yeah,
in 2014 with that mission, and kind of it's been a roller coaster ever since. But gosh, worth it every year.
yeah. So that's really cool. And like you notice that there's a need in your community, and then you like started. 'Cause I feel like a lot of like the church. I think that like the need is, well, I don't know how to like sit with someone whenever they are disclosing to me or like coming out. I feel like a lot of that is, or just sit with them without like saying, okay, just pray about it. Like I think what people really want is just people to just listen and sit with them and help them like process and navigate those feelings. Now
Mm,
some people might want like, okay, like a scripture, but I think a lot of people are just looking for someone to just be present with them while they're navigating like very messy things that they are going through. And but I'm interested in kind of like how like you, because you like in being celibate and choosing celibacy, but also like how you develop like your like community, or like in just the value of friendship that it has for your life. And I can't believe we're at 36. It doesn't feel like we're at 36 minutes, but like
time
it's been good. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Long story short, while I'm not bisexual, I'm not generally attracted to women. I would consider myself gay. I was in this Christian fraternity that had date events that I had to take girls to. I was pretty out in college, so these girls knew that I was gay. I would take them on these date events. Like they knew I was not trying to make anything happen. I wasn't trying to fake anything either. But a couple times we enjoyed it, hanging out, and I said like, hey, I'm not trying to fake anything here, but this was fun. Do you want to keep on hanging out? And I ended up dating three of those women, and I fell in love with two of those women, and almost got engaged to one of those women, and we broke up for reasons unrelated to my sexuality. But I knew that Christian marriage could work for me. But I also knew that the kind of singleness for the sake of the kingdom that the scriptures talked about was an option for me as well. And I just had this sense from the Holy Spirit that instead of going and taking the one I preferred, I was supposed to discern. I was supposed to ask God, like, God, do you know which of these two would be better for me specifically? And do you want to give me that gift? And over a couple of years of discernment, it became clear to me that God was calling me to vocational singleness. God wanted to give me that gift, but I knew I did not have some kind of magical gift of celibacy, that I didn't need
Yeah,
human companionship anymore, that all I needed was like Jesus in my prayer closet. And so I asked my local pastor, I said, how am I going to find the kind of family in the body of Christ that I need at this church to be faithful in my celibacy, to be sustained in my celibacy? And he was very honest and basically said, you're not going to find it at our church or any church in
yeah.
Nashville. None of our
Yeah,
churches
this is
do
honest.
well enough for a person who is like walking on long-term celibacy. But he said pretty clear that like, monasticism has been the most common way that celibate people have found family. And he said, I think you should start some kind of intentional Christian community that's kind of a
Yeah,
modern version of monasticism to find the family that you need, to build the family that you need. And so that was about, 7, 8 years ago now. And there was a group of us who just started gathering together for meals at first. And then eventually we moved in together. And over the past 7 years, there's been anywhere from 4 to 7 of us living in a house together, praying together every morning before work, having kind of 3 or 4 dinners together a week, doing some of the big holidays together, going on vacations together, being family for each other. And I
that
still live
sounds
with three of those guys today, and we live in a house, and we prayed together this morning, and we're gonna have dinner together on Sunday night, and we're doing Christmas together this year, and so we're excited about that.
This sounds a lot like my like community and friend group. I know this is like it's weird because we're like, because in a college context, it's so different. At least at my college, where everybody like even I guess like professors kind of have noticed like my community like friend group, because we're so tight, and we're also very, we do life together, like literally have dinner, we just do everything together, and it's different. We're like, and with other people that I've noticed is that they like everybody's kind of scattered, and then there's us that we really care about each other. And so that's like my hope for friendship for like Gen Z is that we value friendship, and for those of us that are choosing singleness, to have that community of people and to have this that family isn't just like a husband, wife, and two kids like it was in like 1950, because it's not 1950 anymore, and people can have different ways of how they feel they could have family. And it sounds like that's kind of what you found with developing your community. And so I had a question. Oh yeah, so how's it like for other people when you, I guess, you express your desire, and like over time, how did like people, I guess, like I want to ask specifically for men, how did they kind of taken that vision for friendship that you have?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's easy to do community in like that kind of way in college because
Yeah.
you live in close proximity, you have shared mission, you do your like chores, like meals, laundry, whatever, in similar places. And so there's a lot of logistical factors that are making it a lot easier to live in an intentional Christian community. And all those go away when you graduate.
Yeah.
And so right now, people in college can kind of do intentional Christian community in a fairly what feels like organic way. It feels like, oh, it just happens. You know, we don't have a bunch of rules. We're not setting up a bunch of systems. It just happens. But it just happens because college, the experience of college is creating all of that structure. There is structure. It is not actually organic. So the challenge is when you leave college and the structure of being in college together goes away, no one's providing the structure for you. And if we just rely on it happening organically, we will have no friends. We will have no
Yeah. To
community. So the
be
only way to
intentional.
do it is actually to say, you know, to some of my guy friends who we just see each other once a month or so, is to say, hey, I like seeing you. I would love to do more life with you, but probably the only way that we're actually going to do life on life is like if we like lived in the same house or we lived in close proximity and we committed at least for a season to certain rhythms together and to do them even if we don't enjoy them, even if we find them
Absolutely.
boring that day. And I mean, talk to any married people. They know that like marriage ceases being organic in many ways. I mean, a lot of the beautiful things about marriage have to be planned. That this idea that the relationships that mean the most are the ones that everything happens spontaneously and organically is just a fairy tale. You know, it's a Disney Channel story, but it's not how real relationships work long term. Relationships are sustained through intentional rhythms that we do even when we don't want to do them. And so that's my
Yeah.
suggestion for kind of friendship outside of college is, I mean, I think living in the same apartment complex or in the same house with some Christian people and committing to certain rhythms of life together is really great. At the very least, in order to stay connected with people, you're going to have weekly commitments to get breakfasts or dinners or late night beer or wine together to catch up. Because otherwise, it's not going to happen. You know, otherwise, you can go a month or two without seeing each other if you just wait for both of you to
The
spontaneously want.
right time.
You know,
The right.
whereas I'll tell you, like I have 5 friends in my life that I have weekly hangout, essentially appointments with them in my calendar,
Yeah.
and we've been
And
doing that
that,
for years. You
yeah,
know,
that's a thing with at least my friends, is that like even though like yeah it's a college context, we're very like intentional, like all like we're very even now, like because the season is like summer and we're like not in school, we still like I've also like been surprised at myself because I'm not like, I'm introverted, I'm not like a social butterfly, so like I'm like surprised at myself, even with this season, uh, the fact that we've been very like adamant about hanging out with each other and building our community and friendships. I'm like kind of surprised, and I like joke. It's like I can't get away from these people, like because I thought like I could get away from these people like out of college, but no, I think it's a different style than what I'm used to, because there is like the aspect of, okay, the default of college in the context is just you guys are all have the same similar routines and similar like structures and proximity. Proximity is another thing about friendship, but but no, like we do like, and I guess another thing too that helps is that Pittsburgh, like Pittsburgh is, I don't know if you've been in Pittsburgh, but it's like it's a small city. Well, it feels like they call it a small town with a city feel. So
Mm,
like you see a lot of the same people, and you're in sort of like the same spaces as people. So
yeah,
that helps as well.
yeah.
So, but yeah, we've been like a lot intentional this season, and also like you also have to be with like my international friends. I'm very intentional because you can't see them, so you have to FaceTime them, and like even like as an introvert, and your like default is to like just go a while without talking. Sometimes you have to step outside of that and just put in the action before the desire comes in. So, but yeah,
Yeah, makes sense.
but yeah, that's really cool. And then another thing I liked is that your post on masculinity,
Hmm.
because I just got a new book. I don't know where to put it. It's called Men of Virtue, and I don't know if you've heard of it.
Mm-mm.
I recommend getting that book. It talks about masculinity, but like seeing it in a biblical lens, and
Yeah, yeah,
how like there's talks about like the cultural crisis of masculinity, and how like men are kind of lost in their identity. But then it talks about this book grounds masculinity in the fruits of the spirit, and I find that like very cool. It's really cool because it's
yeah.
a different way of seeing it instead of something to like people need to achieve. And I liked your post on that too, because I think like men feel that masculinity is something like to achieve. Like once I achieve this, then I'll be man enough. So
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, in many ways, most of what we consider to be masculinity is culturally constructed. I
yeah,
think at most, what the scriptures offer us is that men and women are biologically different, and particularly in the context of a marriage, they will end up having some different roles because of that, just kind of what they're physically capable of doing and kind of what that and how that impacts things. But beyond that, all the scriptures just say is that there should be distinction and difference in some ways between the genders, and we shouldn't mislead people about what our biological sex is. Otherwise, I mean, we look at so many different cultures where Christianity exists today and has existed throughout time. There are so many contradicting profiles of in between those different cultures of what it meant to be a biblical man or a biblical woman in that space in that time. Which doesn't mean that they got it wrong. It means that actually there's very little that's universal.
yeah,
Now, are
yeah,
there some cultural authorities, like Christian cultural authorities somewhere in the church in the West that are kind of forming, shaping, naming, prescribing what it looks like in our particular time and place for men and women to be different? We can have a whole long conversation about like that, who we would trust to do that work. But I think the important thing is that it's whenever we talk arrogantly as if we as Western Christians have discovered the universal biblical masculinity, we're already off the trail. And I don't know. I think it's interesting. I talked to a lot of my gay friends, actually gay male friends, about this, and I think that's a common experience that a lot of us gay male had was gayness and femininity for a man were so linked when we were teenagers. And so there was many of us became obsessed with being masculine enough because it was a way to hide our sexuality. Our any signs of femininity would betray that we are gay. Therefore, we're obsessive about masculinity. And eventually, a lot of us just realize this is a bogus rat race. It's all bullcrap. And
yeah,
it led to us being released from masculinity, essentially. Like, we all just
yeah.
realized masculinity is this dumb thing straight dudes chase. They're meatheads. They're emotional maturity. They are in this age of their own pursuit of the carrot and the stick and the rabbit, whatever. Like, we're beyond that. Screw masculinity. It's all made up anyway. I'm not playing the game anymore. And it was so freeing for many of my friends.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that because I'm straight and I'm very like feminine, and I just also don't care because I and also like my roommate is too. We're both straight and both like effeminate, like musicals. Like I'm in the musicals, which okay. We don't need to. When I mean like by like feminine, I mean like things that people view as stereotypically female. Because like who says that okay you can't like musicals or gardening or whatever. So like I'm also just like a highly sensitive person. So I got a lot of comments in high school about like my sexuality, and people just assume things about me based on just my how I express myself. Which, okay, I see that, but also you need to like think outside the box here. Like not everyone's like the same. So, but yeah, that's interesting because like I feel like we're people choose what masculinity means for us when we're like young, but that's not like if it doesn't fit like who we are authentically, we tend to hide parts of ourselves that we feel it doesn't align with like the larger cultural standard or context of what masculinity is, and then that definitely impacts men, straight men as well. I see that like maybe I don't know if a lot more that people straight men that aren't comfortable with their masculinity. I see that like effect impacting them with just feeling like they have to put on like a I guess image that doesn't always align with who they are.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I do feel like my straight guy friends struggle with masculinity more than my gay guy friends. So
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
haunted by it more. Yeah, and I don't mean to suggest that like gender doesn't matter, that male and
Yeah.
female don't exist, right? But I think interesting because sometimes that's whenever I say basically there's like not much to universal masculinity and it's all culturally created and yada yada yada. People assume that now all of a sudden I'm pushing some kind of complete elimination of gender and biological sex theory. I'm
Yeah,
not. I think
that's
in
not
many
what
ways
this is.
this
Yeah.
arbitrary sorting of things that have nothing to do with biological sex into different genders, saying that boys aren't supposed to like musical theater and girls aren't supposed to like football is the kinds of things that leads people to gender
Yeah.
identity questions.
Yeah, that it does. It leads people to internalize those messages and feel like their personality or their identity, there's something wrong with them. They feel like they feel shame. And, for a while that was kind of me like middle school and high school, but then I'm like more so now like I don't care.
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't care.
But yeah, it's
So,
interesting when they look at the statistics and break down among people who identify as trans today, a very small percentage of them actually say, I look in the mirror and I think I'm in the wrong body.
mhm.
Many more, it's they say, I feel like I don't live up to expectations for my gender. And so something must be wrong with my gender or something must be off
Or
about
I
my
have
gender
like the wrong gender then.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I just think is really interesting. I mean, there are those people who undeniably look in the mirror and they're like, wrong body. And that is
Mhm.
that is, I mean, a painful thing to be carrying and totally legitimate and needs lots of support and care. But I wonder if we just kind of got away from this over prescribing of gender, if we would
Yeah.
resolve a majority of people's concerns who identify as trans.
Yeah, that makes sense because if people don't really have a secure definition of gender for themselves, or if they don't, if they internalize messages from culture or their family or just from their peers, then they definitely are going to feel like, okay, I am wrong, so I need to change something about myself so that to make things right. And that's where it goes like unnecessary change because like for me, I was like, I don't need to change myself. I'm just like, I don't, I'm cool. I'm a cool, I'm into like very cool things, even though like people might see that as like feminine. I'm like, I'm just a cool person. So I think that's where there's like identity security comes into play.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah. So I don't know if you still, we're like almost at an hour. I don't know like how long you want to go.
Yeah, I do have kind of another. I don't have another meeting that starts this hour, but I do have
Yeah.
a chunk of work that I do have another meeting in the next hour and do need to like get kind of a chunk of work done in this hour. So
Yeah, sounds good. So we can like wrap up. I can just do like one more question.
sure,
And
yeah, yeah.
okay. One more question is how would you say that for men that in regard to friendship, what would you say if like how men can look for more, I guess, depth in their friendships and not be so afraid of intimacy?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think some of it's just like recognizing that where we have some of the most need is for people to meet us in our painful emotions. For them to know that we're experiencing fear or sadness or anger, to be willing to show that to those men, and then for them to hold that space with us. Both because it makes it easier for us to kind of feel through those, and it makes them feel less heavy and less big. And just there's so much research about like I'll say, for example, part of my story has been sexual addiction recovery, and I've been in some sexual addiction recovery spaces, and over again, the straight men in those spaces have said that the solution to their sex addiction is not a hotter wife. They've discovered that the solution to their sex addiction is actually more friendship with men, is actually learning that they have these needs for connection. There's nothing wrong with that, but they were never meant to satisfy all of that in one sexual relationship.
Yeah.
They're made for friendship with many people, and they've realized they can love their spouse better when they're experiencing more non-sexual intimacy with men in their life. So there's something universal about that. So many of the ways that men tend to turn to alcohol or to gambling or to video games or to anger in distress, the antidote to those things is talking with your dudes about how you're angry and sad and scared, and letting them hold those spaces with you. And that's not weakness, right? Actually being afraid of painful feelings and then letting that ignoring of our painful feelings then take over our life and make decisions for ourselves about how we medicate those. That is not strength, that is weakness.
Yeah, it comes like drive.
Is doing hard things, and doing hard things so that we are the masters of our story and we decide what we're going to do with our life, not our emotions deciding for us because we've ignored them for so long that now they're hijacking our system. And so, if men want to be strong, do the hard things. Do the hard things. And the hard things sometimes connecting with our painful emotions with other men.
So it's like the compartmentalization of desire, of stewarding your desires. People feel that can't be fulfilled in friendship, so they like maybe like numb out with different substances or different activities.
Yeah.
That's like
more often we're not numbing directly kind of a desire for sexual connection. Where much more often, particularly when we talk about sexual addiction and desire and lust, it has little to do with actually romance or sex. It has to do with fear, sadness, and anger that we don't want to connect with, and we are avoiding. And then our brain, for some of us, our brain has learned to say, you want to avoid fear, sadness, or anger? Here's lust. Lust is a tool for avoiding our fear, sadness, or anger. But lust is actually the problem. Lust is just the wrong solution that our broken bodies and minds are offering us.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of Christian men can hold, is because at least from in some of the spaces that I see, we're so focused on like lust and pornography, but we're not focused on what we feel is scarce. We're trying to feel like a need, and like this scarcity mindset that people have of fulfilling desires. And I think that's something that like at least we need to focus on more, so that we are kind of getting to like the heart of our behaviors that we aren't like really necessarily proud of.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so I feel like we have a lot more to talk about. So I would like to have you back on.
Sure,
if you would like to be on, and you can meet the rest of the gang. So, but yeah, it was a pleasure having you on, and I am gonna just I've been listening to like the podcast that you've done with like other people, and it's been very interesting and eye opening. So I'm excited to
thank you
learn
for the
more.
opportunity. I really enjoyed the conversation as well.
Yeah. So thank you. It's been Men's Couch, everyone. Listeners, please remember to subscribe to YouTube and Instagram for more, and also listen to us on Spotify.